So welcome everybody. My name is Charlie Schrier. I am the head of marketing at TeamOhana. TeamOhana is a headcount spend management platform. We help you plan, hire, promote, and retain your workforce. And we're going to put that to the side for the moment. And we're going to have a conversation with Teddy Collins and Frank Cebek from SeatGeek. Frank, I'll start with you. If you could just give us a quick intro, who you are, how long you've been at SeatGeek, and yeah, what your career path has been like.
Yeah, for sure. My name is Frank Cebek. Been at SeatGeek for about 7 years, which is crazy to say sometimes out loud. I'm currently the Senior Director of People. I oversee recruiting, HR operations, and people analytics. I initially joined to oversee technical recruiting when we were about a 100-person company. But prior to that, been wearing a lot of hats in the people organization, but mainly talent acquisition at a lot of startups. Had the opportunity to work at companies like Braintree and Venmo right when we got acquired by PayPal. Worked at a smaller company in New York called WeWork, a company that got acquired by WeWork. But before that, also really got to cut my teeth on the talent acquisition side in the Bay Area for 3 years, consulting for a couple of tech companies out there.
Awesome. Thanks. Teddy, I'll pass it to you.
Hi, thanks for having me. My name's Teddy Collins. I'm VP of Corporate Finance at SeatGeek. One of the long-timers like Frank, so coming up on 9 years for me. I was the first FP&A hire of the now CFO, so was really over the years been able to build things that weren't there before, and kind of going from about 190 to 100 people when I joined to over 900 now. It's been a lot of learnings on headcount, and as a R&D and technology focused company, that's people are our most important asset, and it's been a evolving and really critical operational process and strategic process for us over the years.
Awesome. Thanks so much for sharing that. So we're just going to jump right into the webinar. I want to start with a poll. So everybody that's on here right now, if you wouldn't mind just taking a peek at the poll, I'm going to launch it now. And just really interested in why you're joining us today. What's going on in your business that prompted you to join us and kind of want to learn about what Teddy and Frank are doing at SeatGeek. So it looks like we're getting just a lot of people who are interested in best practices. Budget oversight is definitely something that's top of mind for a lot of companies right now. Preparing for the next financial event, collaboration with hiring managers. These are very good. I'll give them maybe one more minute to see if we get any more responses. But it looks like the biggest thing is around best practices for headcount planning. So Teddy, Frank, keep that in mind as you're answering the questions. And I think we're definitely going to be able to share some really good insights around how you guys are doing it and what's really working well for you. Awesome. Thanks so much, everybody, for participating in the poll. We'll have a couple more of those. And I can share out these results right now so that you can take a look at them, and I will get right in. So Teddy,
No one wants
to start with you.
Accelerate growth. Come on.
I know nobody's accelerating growth right now. So I think we should talk about that as well, and maybe see if we can bring that to the forefront a little bit on maybe why. So before we get into that though, Teddy, I want to start with you. And I want to ask at a very high level, and then but ask that you tell us in some detail, what is your headcount planning process at SeatGeek? And if you could kind of like walk us through the sequence of events, like when you start, what are the different steps that you go through, when do you run different planning and replanning and forecasts, like what does it look like at a broad level?
Well, I'll go kind of way back to 2014, 2015, before I joined, and SeatGeek was only a few dozen people at that time and had done a series A, B, and C of financing. So here's this company, a lot of capital, trying to take on the world. And I think in the beginning it was, hey, someone had an idea, they'll Slack, or at that time HipChat, the CEO, and be off to the races. But I think as we've evolved, we've kind of combined people, processes, and systems from early on foundational tools, ATS, applicant tracking system, to a lot of spreadsheets in between, and then financial planning tools and accounting tools, and then here we are in a more mature state with TeamOhana. So I think there's kind of a couple different tracks. I think at the foundation, there's a strategic process that, hey, what is the talent strategy of the company? So a lot of collaboration in the C-suite, the department heads, recruiting, HR business partners of, hey, what are the goals? And we'll talk about that definitely during budget season, which goes on 2 times a year at SeatGeek. So that's kind of the opportunity to say, hey, what are the goals? What at a high level and eventually on a role level, what is kind of the plan for the 6 months for the next year? Then, after kind of those things are agreed upon, it's kind of off to the races with kind of reaching that operational excellence. So, we have that North Star, the budget, and we've been a high growth company over the years, both headcount and underlying business drivers. So that means the only constant is change for us. So what we can do as the finance business partner in this process is, really keep track of the numbers. So in collaboration with, we have a built out total rewards function. We've had, a lot of great work over the prior year. So we do have that rule set. Finance would love to say like, hey, here's the compensation for this role in this region and this level, and then we can really work with any hiring manager or department lead of, hey, we want to pivot, we want to split these roles, we want to spin up a new group and help kind of model that out and really give them a high level of confidence of say, hey, we can do this in a budget compliance manner. So I think that's where most of the hours that go into the process. So, Frank, on the organizational design perspective, finance is on the kind of operational execution, and us representing the budget, Frank representing the rest of the organization.
Yeah, that's helpful. And I want to double click on something you said around like, tracking the numbers and budget compliance and making sure that kind of you're staying like as your role, you're keeping within that financial budget. But like, can you share a little bit about, I mean, the like why seems obvious, right? Because we want to stay within our budgets. But can you walk us through a little bit more like in depth on like what can happen if you're not staying on top of that and tracking it really closely?
And the things that we want to do with all of these trades, and we want to at least know what we're getting into. It's okay to go over budget sometimes if the company wants to go over budget, but you certainly don't want to get either, hiring plan scope creep or unaccounted for hires. You kind of really want to control the controllables. So I think what Frank and I have collaborated over a number of years on this process is, hey, at least let's have a very transparent process. Let's have the right intake points, and let's give a set of tools, whether it be spreadsheets or systems or financial plans, to folks to be able to at least express what they want and have us shepherd it through to getting those roles live.
Yeah, that's helpful. And I think we'll talk a lot more about collaboration a little bit later in the webinar. But Frank, I'm going to go a little off script on you here, and I don't. So I'm interested, but I'm interested in if you could share. Teddy mentioned having a really transparent process. Like, what does that mean in your perspective? Like, what is a transparent process, and why is it so important?
Yeah, so I believe a lot of parties have to be involved. So when we went through our big growth phase coming out of the pandemic, it was really just a group of 4 people navigating this, and it was stressful and challenging. We had a lot of learnings from it, but it was mainly myself, Teddy, a financial business partner who's actually on the people analytics team, and our old total rewards leader. But if you fast forward to 2024, we're a tech company, so we use Slack. But we have a really big Slack channel with a lot of different people in it, from the HRBP team, compensation team, leadership folks, people on the finance team. We're just always over communicating in that channel in a positive way. And really, we found our lanes of ownership in this process. Every party has, which has been really nice. And I won't lie, it's definitely been a game changer having a HR business partner team, which we didn't have until about 2 years ago. Those are the folks who are really connected to the business. Like obviously myself and my recruiting managers are also getting information, but having that other data point is super helpful. And the one thing, like, even though we go into it with a very structured plan, or we hope we do, going into a year or like the second half, we're a growing business, so realistically things are going to change, priorities are going to change. So being able to accommodate a stakeholder's request in a timely manner is also super important. So having, different eyes and ears across the organization has definitely been a game changer. But yeah, we over communicate in the channel, and it's great because we never run into a trap in saying, oh, we're over hiring, we're over budget, we're going after the wrong type of talent profile. Is this actually a need? And we definitely had learnings along the way, going through that massive growth for those 2 years. So yeah, definitely transparent, pulling a lot of parties. Everyone touches different parts of this process, like I said. And then obviously just make sure you have a good relationship with those folks that you can lean on to get that information.
And on
Yeah.
the finance side, with a transparent distributed process, and unstructured data and Slack channels and emails, I think what we've also tried to do on the back end is, hey, what are the processes and systems and tools we can get in place to not lose track of backfills, or kind of model out new hires, or keep that kind of audit log across the trades, across the emails, across the in-person conversations, to say, like, what is the story? How did we get to this point today?
Yeah, that's great. Really helpful. So, Frank, I want to kind of go back and double click on the fast hiring
Yeah.
that you talked about, where there was just 4 of you and you were kind of really running fast. I know you mentioned in our prep calls that you guys hired 700 people, I think, in 2 years, something like that, which is, that's a big number in a short period of time with a small amount of people like supporting that. First of all, like, tell us what that experience was like, and how you even got through it. And then second, it would be, I think, really helpful, and Teddy, would love for you to jump into after Frank shares, is what were some of the gaps that you identified, or where did you identify inefficiencies? Like, what were the big challenges that you realized you were facing, and then used to kind of go figure out what is the ideal process? What is the process we want to have?
Yeah. I'll take it from a people HR standpoint. I'll let Teddy dive into more of the
Yeah.
systems part. Yeah, it was stressful, but it was super fun. It was super challenging. I think the first challenge that we had to clear the hurdle was like growing out the recruiting team. We just didn't have the staff to accommodate the request. And I think the second biggest thing is, like, since we were coming out of the pandemic and was all this pent up demand and growth within the business itself and rebounding, there wasn't too much foresight in that first year in terms of like what was needed, right? And I think a lot of the organization was still trying to figure out what were the priorities and where were we pivoting coming out of COVID. So one of the big things that we really did was to ensure that, one, we were setting appropriate expectations across the business in terms of like the recruiting team and what we're working on and the when we're working on it. Just because, if you're a growing business, and there's all this growth and people have all these things that they're working on, every hire is a priority, right? To the hiring manager, they want you to open it right away. So we came up with a really great planning method where we put together like a recruiting capacity model to really map out when we can open up these roles and when we expected to close it, and really ensure that also every recruiter had like a quote unquote full book of business, and then really had a strong change management or comm strategy to share this information more broadly with the organization. But of course, there was a lot of conversations with managers and leadership to make sure that we were spacing out these hires accordingly, of when they needed them and when certain things were hitting the product roadmap or some big initiatives are coming through the business. So that was a big part of it. The other thing that was very hard to navigate was the organizational design perspective. Like, you don't want to make sure you're hiring the wrong people or the wrong level of seniority. So a lot of the work I've worked on with our old Total Rewards leader was really trying to like flesh out a job architecture while kind of growing the business at this rate, which was really hard. But we got to a spot we felt comfortable where we had a baseline of it to not only allow us to target the right level of seniority within the organization, but it also helped a lot from a budgeting perspective on how we benchmark roles and worked with Teddy to make sure that we were coming in under budget. And we definitely have a more robust job architecture now because we put a lot of focus into it. But I was really proud that we kind of like, what's the saying? Like, fly the plane while building it, and did it like in 3 months while accommodating the business. So those are some of the things that we worked through, and came up with solutions with. And then also the last piece on the organizational design piece is because we didn't have a business partner team yet. like kind of playing that role along with some of the other HR centers of excellence, like the leadership positions on that team. But yeah, it was great navigating. Like I said, it was stressful. We were tasked to do it very quickly and have a very quick turnaround. But you know, a lot of people stepped up, came up with a lot of out of the box solutions that accommodated our business and the way we operate in our culture. But it was inspiring too, right? But you know, we definitely got some stuff wrong along the way for sure.
Yeah, I think one thing that there's been a lot of great foundational work that kind of turns this, keeps kind of the operating principles together from, first principles. It's the org design, it's the job levels, the career paths. Can you really kind of tell the candidates the story of how you progress, and really think about, things like, um, what's the individual contributor manager ratios and like what's career progression going to look like for folks. And on the compensation side, we went from the early days where, Frank and I with a Radford survey and off to the races. And the people on the business side, it was kind of like bring your own salary to the process. It's like, okay, I feel like the market is this. And really responding to market demands where we saw, big increases, post pandemic and in certain periods in certain parts of certain markets, certain jobs, but not all of them. And I think when you have if you have finance running the process, yes, we can tell when numbers are red or black. But I think having the HR element really kind of keeps the human in the process and the whys behind it. So having them provide those the principles around compensation bands, job architecture, it really kind of keeps that guesswork out of finance's hands.
Yeah, and I guess the
And
one thing I'll just add on that, I forgot to mention the challenge too with rolling out all this stuff was we were hiring roles that we never hired for because there were new, pockets that we were of teams that we were creating within the organization. So it was also like a learning process of like, hey, oh, so you're saying this needs to get done, so maybe you need this type of talent. So it was also that really good conversation at the beginning of it as well, like identifying, what was actually needed to some extent.
yeah, that's really helpful. In the spirit of kind of keeping us moving forward, I'm interested in, and Teddy, I'll ask this question to you around, okay, so you're running this process, you're kind of running really fast and probably identifying areas, as both of you alluded to, like where, okay, we need to build a job architecture, we need to make sure our compensation framework is really clear. What are there specific metrics that, or KPIs that you were tracking to say this is working well, this is not working well? And like what are those have those KPIs stayed with you to like where you are today? Which KPIs are you tracking?
Yeah. I'll leave some of the recruiting KPIs to Frank, but I think from a finance perspective, what we're trying to do is, hey, at any given point in time, day or night, can we say exactly what the plan is? Here's the budget. Here, everything is kind of reconciled and represented where we want in the systems. Because I think what we on the finance side are trying to do is, hey, let us not be the blocker. Let us set everything up to unblock the business. And it's ultimately it's up to them to write the job descriptions and go out and open the role and have the candidate interview questions. So on the recruiting side, the KPIs are more of like time to fill. I think for us, it's more like from intake to time to live, and we have a target open date, and can we hit that? And then it's kind of on the business and on recruiting to execute the plan after that. Frank?
Why is it important to hit that, like that? Can we hit the open date? Like why from a finance perspective do you care about that specifically?
Well, yeah, so I think where we don't want to be play the CF no role. It's like we want to get saving. If we miss that date and we are under on getting people into the business, okay, that's great. We're saving tens of thousands or hundreds of $1,000s a month on the payroll side, but we're also not developing those new tools and features to help drive the business. So we want to kind of maximize velocity on the operational side to at least set up the business to get the people in the door to help continue to improve our products and services.
Thanks. Yeah, and Frank, I'll let you talk a little bit about, any of the HR recruiting metrics that you're tracking to measure the success of your headcount process.
Yeah, pertaining to like headcount planning, like recruiting KPIs, the ones that I obviously cared about was time to fill, because that allowed us to come up with when we anticipated a role to be opening and close. Hires per month, which is a good correlation to time to fill, and then hires per quarter, because that's just our planning cycle in terms of how we track business metrics here. And then another big one is I call it a full book of business. It's essentially like a weighted model that we use to ensure that recruiters were almost at a full capacity, which I know sometimes seems scary, being on the red line for months on end, but it was needed at that point when we were hiring that many folks. So just ensuring that that there was no gaps in productivity, but also trying to manage that that flexibility in terms of creating that opening. Like we're not only accommodating net new incremental growth, but also backfills for the organization, right? So those were the main one that we tracked when we went through that big growth period, and even what we're tracking today.
How are you making decisions based on that book of business? Like, is that are you using that to drive decision making around roles that you're opening, or is it just around recruiter capacity, or like how do you make decisions around that?
It's all of that, right? So it's
Okay.
recruiter capacity, what they can actually achieve and obtain goals. But going back to what I initially said, it's like we want to try to come up with a blueprint in terms of when we're opening these roles across the organization. SeatGeek even today has gotten really big, and there's a lot of hiring managers, a lot of different sub departments within departments. So setting that expectation, it's always a challenge because, like I said, everyone thinks their need is the highest priority. But if you don't have an accurate understanding, or you can forecast like when you anticipate roles to be closing, then you can't give your stakeholders an idea of when you're gonna start the search. And that has an impact, right? Because certain people need certain hiring managers need certain people in the door by X date for this big initiative that's going on. And that really just goes back to, like I said, there's leaning on over communicating and transparency with the business partnership team, but also the people in the organization that you're making the hire for.
Awesome. So we've talked about process, we've talked a little bit about metrics and KPIs, about transparency and communication. And one thing we haven't really touched on much is, like, from a tech stack perspective, you guys use Greenhouse for your ATS and Workday for your HR, your HCM, and then Workday Adaptive for your financial planning. Like, what was sort of missing from that tech stack? Like, was there challenges related to that were not being able to, like, where you weren't able to provide those, like, find these metrics, get to these processes, provide that transparency? Like, can you talk a little bit about how the tech stack like works together?
Yeah, Ted, do you want to go? Or you...
And yeah, so it's been we're kind of a best of breed kind of software place. We've got data and a lot of different systems, but really kind of nothing in the market could triangulate between calculating the numbers, have the communication workflows, and have the right licensing model to get people in. So with some of the bigger financial tools, they're great, they're very powerful, but it's kind of enterprise software, and it's not a focus on design. Maybe the license structure can't learning curve's too high to get people in just to make a simple request. And on the other end of the spectrum, emails and Slack messages and spreadsheets, how do you connect all of those together? So I think it's been an evolution of kind of spreadsheets and different automations over the years to kind of plug those holes. And I became aware of TeamOhana a number of years ago, and I think we were building TeamOhana in Google Sheets over years, and we kind of saw there was this kind of need in the market that is pretty consistent with all the peers that I talked to. And I think we're finally flipped the switch for us is I think this was kind of the last spreadsheet that we got rid of within the business and within the overall kind of financial planning infrastructure, is kind of that very detailed role level plan that's kind of high velocity that can automatically sync to all your systems where all the people can see it in a permission based architecture. It's like we were achieving that in spreadsheets, but then there's kind of the time and the overhead to keep that going.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, one, I want to say I was very proud of our spreadsheet as it evolved over time, because I think it was a working product for about 5 or 6 years. But yeah, just doubling down on what Teddy said. And I would also just, I would mention, like, I don't think we really hit our stride until probably a year ago with our HR stack in terms of how we automated a lot of things. Prior to 2022, we were on a pretty legacy HRIS that had a lot of limitations on it. And also, I think the biggest thing is, like, we also want to promote internal mobility. So having like a TeamOhana that connects to your acquisition software and connects to your HRIS with your current employee base has been really helpful to reconcile a lot of these transactions. And also, while we don't technically follow true position management at this point, I think we're getting there now because we can correlate all these systems and they talk between each other. But as we continue to grow and become more mature, like, maybe we'll have more of a formal position management strategy and how we track that. But definitely heading in the right steps. And like Teddy said, like, it's noticeable over the past year how much automation we incorporate into it, less manual work on the admin side, and then additionally just reducing some of the mistakes that we've had. Because anytime we go through spreadsheets or do manual inputs, it's like, you're trying to find a data point or find a transaction that happened like 5 or 6 months ago, and it's like going through Slack and emails and whatnot. So it's definitely put a lot more time back into our pockets.
Yeah, and transparency is kind of the core values at SeatGeek. So getting, one of the Q&A questions is, what do people think about visibility, who has access to what? And we want to, so different combinations. Hey, we want everyone to see everything, but maybe not salary for these set of folks, and then maybe for certain hiring managers, certain department leads, maybe they also see salary information and equity information. So when you're trying to kind of run that highly transparent process in a distributed plan, that's where kind of spreadsheets can fall a little bit short and kind of eventually create that overhead of, okay, well, we've got to branch this, and this version can have salaries, this one doesn't, and how do we merge all of this information together and keep that single source of truth?
Great. Thanks for answering that that question that came through from one of our audience members. I actually wanted to ask a question from the audience members. Connor submitted a question. It's a little long, so Frank, I don't know if you have the Q&A open, but you might want to just open it really quick to take a look. I'll read it out for everybody here, but part of this exercise is enabling your business leaders to understand these ideas of job architecture to ensure they're identifying the right roles and levels to absorb the changes in scope and company KPIs or objectives. As you kicked off forecasting efforts and headcount planning, how did you coach the leaders to build trust that your request and forecast was truly the best reflection of business needs? I think that's a really interesting question, and it kind of leads into some of the other things we're going to talk about around empowering hiring managers and collaboration across the business. But I'll leave it there. I want to see if Frank, Teddy, whoever wants to jump in first to maybe help answer that.
I'm smiling because this person knows the answer. He is the old total rewards leader that has helped us a lot in this process in the early days. So yeah, I mean, I would say in the beginning, it was definitely a challenge to incorporate it and instill trust. The way that we went about it from the recruiting side is we try to bring a lot of like profiles from the market to show, what a certain level of type of employee would be. The main issue that we faced going through that big growth is, like, the only request or answer we got to this question was like, all right, so what do you need? I need someone really senior with a really big title. And it's like, well, what are you working on? What's your objectives? And then also, realistically, how many resources you need, because the more senior you get, the more costs and whatnot. So in the early days, it was pretty hard to navigate, because it was, we were instilling this new thing, job architecture, to the organization. And like I said, there wasn't really a good practice around it as a true tech company where we were. The organization was pretty flat before we went through that big growth period. So really trying to educate as we were opening up roles and the identification phase. So just bringing like the type of profiles you see, because some people had a misrepresentation of like what a certain level was. Like, oh, it's an actually pretty senior hire, and this is the scope and influence they would have. Today, fast forward to 2024, we did a really good job as in people organization and really doubling down of how important job architecture is, not just to hiring, but it's like everything, right? In terms of career mobility, your compensation programs, how you reward people, how you recognize people. And we have a lot more like documentation that people can self-service on. And also it's, our HRBPs are going to market or to the organization beating this drum for us, which has been really nice. And since people are getting more, have a better understanding of it, they're more engaged with it in terms of the type of conversations, like pushing back how we benchmark roles or pushing back on, the level of the role or whatnot. So it was definitely a challenge, but yeah, the early days is, going and showing, LinkedIn profiles to managers to really like hamper down. Cause, there were conversations with like, hey, we need a director level. And then you show them someone on paper and like, oh, like that person looks perfect. They do exactly what they're doing at this other organization. It's like, oh, well, guess what? That's like 4 layers below than what you're saying you need. So it was definitely a learning curve. Like I said, that was easily, in my opinion, the hardest part of those 2 years was really making sure we were identifying the right types of folks we were going through. But it's definitely gotten easier over time. So thanks, Connor, for the question. Hopefully I answered it correctly.
And I think what finance tried to insert itself in that process is, hey, we know the overall plans of the company, and we can kind of provide that financial constraint and kind of that set of funds that the company can work within. When we were a little earlier and still had hundreds and hundreds of roles to hire, we were getting into new business lines, having new teams, new sub teams. So there was always this kind of evolving org designs as well. And now that we kind of have a lot of those orgs for the most part built out, the financial constraints and the budget as the North Star is much more important. And I think overall, what building a culture of trust and transparency has been really helpful, where when we're in between budget cycles, seeing department heads trading off roles and allowing, say, hey, I'll turn out to fund this role. We can not deprioritize this backfill. So it's kind of great to see from that perspective. As long as people know the rule set, there is less kind of less principal Asian problems. People aren't trying to game the system or just keep placeholder roles in there in case they might need them. It's all linked to the org design, which is kind of linked to the company strategy and operational plan.
It's great. And that leads us, I think, into maybe one of the last things we'll talk about today, which is really around empowering hiring managers and giving them the tools that they need to be successful and to really take ownership of not just their plan, but also their budget. And when things are happening in the business that need to make adjustments, and Teddy, you need to go to them and say, hey, we need to do X, Y, and Z because of where we are in the business or because of the org design or something like that. They can then go make their own changes. So Teddy, I wanted to ask you a little bit about just the idea of, I think what I'm alluding to is the idea of like scenario planning for when things need to change, or you need to save money, or maybe you have a new objective. Can you first of all explain a little bit about how you do it at SeatGeek and like why it's been so impactful?
Yeah, so I think within the, between budget cycles, when it's either, let's say there's a reorg or creating a new team, or it's just kind of moving a few roles behind or around, in our legacy system, we would have a nice spreadsheet template. We'd say, hey, here's the current plan, here's a bucket for new hires. There would be check boxes involved, some formulas that would kind of try to get down to like that one single number of the constraints, either it be number of positions, salary, equity, signing bonus, and so on. And I think what we were kind of the algorithm that we tried to do is, hey, there's a lot of trade-offs. Well, other alternate funding sources, could it be consultants or turning turning other vendors off, the timing of roles. And I think with that distributed plan, at any given time, we could have a number of scenarios going on. And I think what TeamOhana and that system layer has helped is to further increase velocity of getting these roles open. And hey, when a role is hired, it's not downloading a report from another system and copy pasting it into between spreadsheets, kind of having that really live, fully integrated set of systems. So our personnel data from Workday is getting pushed in automatically when new hires are moved to offer stage or when they're hired and accept it. We don't have to actualize any models. It's automatically posting into Workday as well as TeamOhana, and then even pushing into our financial planning system, Workday Adaptive Planning. So that tool set is really what we're kind of looking for, and kind of take all of that local institutional knowledge of how the approvals need to go and kind of put that systems layer on top of it. So someone just needs to enter in, I want to hire this position, this level of seniority, and all the calculations happen without them having to do formulas or emailing spreadsheets around.
And we also got a question. Could you maybe just give a sentence or two on what scenario planning is at a high level and why you would even do it?
Yeah, two different flavors. One is, hey, here's a blank sheet of paper. Think of a spreadsheet, and each role is one row on that spreadsheet. So you can enter anything that you program into the system. If things are different by the geography you're hiring in, the job family, and so on. And I think the other bigger part of scenario planning is, hey, it's not just about the new people coming in the door, but you might have dozens or hundreds of people in your team or department. How do you want to think about promotions and comp planning, and also bringing new people in within your organization? So think of it as uh, a copy of your hiring plan. Someone can go off and do something on their own, go through an approval process, and then merge it back into the plan. So that was not two sentences, but maybe if you count all the semicolons in there, maybe.
Yeah, might work, might help. Awesome. So we're coming up right on time here. We've got about 5 minutes left. If you do have any questions, audience, please enter those into the Q&A box now. We're happy to start to bring those up. I want to bring up a question, and I think we've touched on it a little bit already. But obviously SeatGeek is a TeamOhana customer. This one is kind of specific around TeamOhana, and asking around, like, interested in the systems you guys are using. And so we've already talked a little bit about that with Workday Greenhouse and Workday Adaptive Planning. But do you feel like you're using TeamOhana to the fullest extent? And like, how do you plan on utilizing it further? Like, what are some of the ways that you are using TeamOhana's headcount spend management platform today? And where do you see it going in the next 6 to 12 months?
That's been a phased rollout for us from the kind of core team of across HR and finance and the business leaders, and then anyone who needs to come and do these scenarios. I think very soon it's going to be one of the few kind of, we'll call it, birthright applications within the company. So basically the entire company have access to say, hey, here's a view of the hiring funnel and certain people requesting new roles, and kind of all of that collaboration happening within TeamOhana. So I think we've gone from a finance HR admin runs TeamOhana perspective. Now we're kind of in the C-suite department heads, scenario planners are coming in with the kind of this white glove guided experience. And I think as we continue to roll it out within the company, it's going to be kind of one of those tools where, hey, anything that has to do with people and organizational design and the hiring funnel will be done within TeamOhana.
Frank, anything to add there, or?
Yeah, no, I mean, we're going to leverage it quite a bit. We're in the process, like Teddy said, to really open it up to the whole organization. It kind of goes, or hitting the point on one of the questions in the Q&A around visibility. I'm a firm believer you want the hiring plan or hiring, funnel, whatever you want to call it, visible to the whole organization. Because like I said, it's really important to set appropriate expectations across the business. And, I think having that visibility also encourages people to have those hard conversations of like where trade-off or priority needs to be set. As you become a bigger organization, and one that's especially continuing to grow, like I said, everyone deems that it's their open rec is the highest and utmost priority of it, right? So right now we're working with the TeamOhana team to figure out how do we provision accounts appropriately so we can more broadly distribute TeamOhana on that dashboard. But before we even moved to TeamOhana, we had like a view only dumbed down version of our hiring plan that we did broadcast across the business, and that has all the information we were talking about earlier, like the role we're hiring for, the open date when we expect it to be closed, just to really set the tone and the cadence of our hiring with the business.
Awesome, thanks. In the last 2 minutes, I want to just ask one more question that had been submitted, and SeatGeek is a late stage company. I can't remember exactly what was your recent fundraise that you guys just did?
Yeah, so we've raised hundreds of millions of dollars in venture capital that we're have put to very good use, but gone through 5 rounds of equity.
5 rounds. So just this person was curious around, as a late stage company, what are some of the pain points that you're now experiencing that maybe are coming up, as a more late stage versus,
I think
a
we've
few rounds ago.
kind of run into some of those where, when things are small enough where the whole company used to be in one room in New York in a small building to, hey, span many different time zones, different currencies, different pay packages. We've got consultants, we've got employees, we have budgets, we have forecasts, many different systems and sources of truth. How to kind of tie that together with data moving between systems, and also being thoughtful about permissioning and giving people the ability to see and impact the things that you want them to impact. So I think that's what we've been trying to do for the most part across this area and other areas of the business.
Yeah, I think I'll talk from a recruiting standpoint. I think one of the challenges that we're facing is just we've had a lot of new folks in the organization, Joe, just making them adapt in terms of how we do talent acquisition here. And then also, I would say it's been a unique year with the job market, just in terms of like, it's finally ramping back up, but it was slow. So how do you work with your stakeholders to make informed decisions? What's the right approach to, hire someone really quickly, be really picky of what you're looking for. So right now, I think it's more market aligned from my viewpoint. But from an operational stance, I think we're doing a great job. I think, obviously we can continue to evolve on how we navigate and partner with the business. But yeah, anytime you introduce new tools like TeamOhana and automate things, it makes things a lot easier. And, as I mentioned, like, I just feel like from a HR operations or infrastructure standpoint, we just really have hit our stride. So any team that we partner with, even, not just finance, but any team we partner with outside of the people team, has just become really more efficient in terms of how we provide information and data to those folks. And just feeling really confident in, navigating, business needs and challenges as they arise.
Awesome. Well, we are officially at time, maybe a minute over in what we had planned to do. So really appreciate Teddy, Frank, both of you guys for being here and sharing your story. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good one.
So we're going to wrap up here. We will be sharing the recording. We also did have a few questions that came through that we weren't able to get to. So Teddy, Frank, I'm going to send you guys those questions and ask that you maybe just type up a short answer that we can send as part of the recording afterwards, so that we get those questions answered for whoever it was that was asking them. And with that, thanks everybody so much for joining. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Bye-bye.